And welcome to our fifth episode of To Your Point, our roundtable discussion about UCF sports and UCF sports adjacent topics. My name is Jeff Allen. I'm your host, and I'm joined in the quad box by three folks who make up our panel, and they come from a variety of different backgrounds: podcasting, journalism, and of course, even a student in the mix as well. So, as we get underway with To Your Point, we will introduce our panel as we roll out this first topic. As I roll this out, it's going to be, what is the state of UCF basketball? I want to give you guys a visual first that I happen to come across, and hopefully you'll be able to see it.
Shut up, Pooh.
So for those who are audio only, it's a picture of Pooh as the lone man in the room. And of course, that is the scene from the last episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air where Will Smith is standing. So that is kind of a good representation of what the state of UCF basketball is. But now let's break it down. Chris Boyle of the Daytona Beach News-Journal, who covers the UCF beats. Chris, you get the first crack at this.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jeff. I'm stunned you're not sick of me yet. I've been on three of these things here.
You're 60%, man. You're doing good.
With basketball, it's rebuilding, and I think the way this is shaping up, unless there's really huge changes in the way that rev share is actually implemented, and the way that if there's any oversight or legislation within the transfer model as we see it right now, this is going to be an every year thing. This is going to be the state of UCF, I think, is Moneyball. I think that's probably if I had to sum it up, they don't have the finances that are required to pay top tier basketball money. All the major resources are going to be allocated to football. So you're going to see the best players on the team probably leave either for the draft, if you're lucky, or for another program, more likely, on a year-to-year basis. And honestly, the players that are on the bench are going to look for bigger opportunities somewhere else. You've seen that now with Niels Mahovsky at Wofford, Tyler Hendricks, who played very well in the Crown along with Mahovsky. He's going to Utah Valley. You're not going to see Darius Johnsons anymore. It's just we have seen probably the last of that, at least in the short term. A true 4-year starting caliber player for a program. And of course, there's the caveat to Darius being that he's Johnny Dawkins' godson. So there's that long-standing relationship. We're just not going to see it anymore. You're going to see year-on-year entire roster turnover in college basketball. And you're going to have to find ways and get creative and find value in the marketplace, whether that's for experienced players, whether that's taking a chance on guys that are coming off of other teams' benches. You're going to see kind of a mixture of that, I think, in this upcoming season, and probably in seasons to come. You're just going to have to adapt and try to win the game on a year-to-year basis. And for Johnny, this is such a huge year coming up for him. It's his 10th year with the program. His contract is not guaranteed for 2026-27. It's kind of a winner or else season. At least that's kind of how it reads from the fan base and from behind the scenes. I don't think that the administration wants to invest in paying out buyouts, but when a contract is not guaranteed, a coaching change in a non-football sport may occur.
Yeah, and definitely, it's almost like a 2-year lame duck status for Johnny, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. All right, next up, we bring to you co-host from the Pegasus Podcast, and I'm sure has a great opinion on this topic, the state of UCF basketball. We welcome Christian Simmons.
Yeah, I think it's never been better. I'm having a great time. I think it's really fun. They
were tournament finalists, Christian. How could you not be having fun?
I mean, come on. I enjoyed the Crown tournament immensely, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more later. But to me, maybe even better than the tournament. That's a lie. Don't quote that. But yeah, it's an interesting spot that UCF men's basketball is in, because I know that there are fans who want Dawkins to be gone now, want him to be gone at the end of next season. And the thing that's tough, and I understand why this is not going to be music to fans' ears, and this is something a lot of them don't want to hear, but it's just the reality of the situation is this is what they are now. And whether rev share works out or not, this is probably still what they're going to be. They're going to be a team that is going to have to essentially rebuild a roster from scratch every offseason. This is not a unique to UCF problem. This is a lot of the sport, but just the gap in what UCF has the ability and the bandwidth to pay to assemble a roster, and what even teams in their own conference have is a chasm. I mean, you have Texas Tech is paying enough money to keep a player who is probably going to go in the first round of the NBA draft from declaring. I mean, we talk about Sham heading out today. I think there's a good chance that he may be getting more money on his own than UCF may have spent on their roster this season or may spend on their roster next season. This is the reality. And I think it sounds so doom and gloom, but I just don't see a way out of it, particularly in the short term, because I think one thing we sort of forget is for as much as the basketball fan base has evolved around campus since they moved to the Big 12, and when UCF's had that sort of unexpectedly successful first season and wins 20 games in year 2 and goes to a tournament, basketball is just not a priority for the administration. It historically has not been, really, at no point in my life. And I think in this time where the administration is trying to fund rev share, when there's so much focus on NIL and paying players, no one in the fan base or the administration is going to be leading the charge to let's take money that is going to football away from football to further fund basketball and make them more competitive. I don't think anybody wants that. And in the interim, if that's the reality of the situation now, until UCF has more money, which, might happen when they're a full share Big 12 member, might not happen until I'm in my 50s, who knows, is you've got to play Moneyball, like Chris said. And the truth is they're not doing a terrible job of it, because they're not at the bottom of the pecking order. They're somewhere in the middle. And the perfect example of that is Milwaukee comes into Orlando and plays UCF in a surprisingly competitive game. And UCF goes, that was interesting. We probably should take your 2 best players once the portal opens. And that's exactly what UCF did. So there's a route to building a roster. I still don't think Dawkins has gotten enough credit for how competitive they've been their first 2 years in the conference. Going into year 1, they were a unanimous pick to finish last in the conference. Fans were talking like they're going to win 7 or 8 games total. And they won, I think they won 17 or 18 that year. They go to the NIT. You go have the crown run this year. It's like, I think if you just keep doing this and you tread water, a tournament season will break through somewhere. It will happen, especially when you're in the Big 12 and there's an opportunity for a Q1 resume building win basically every time you hit the court. It'll happen. It's just never going to happen with consistency, and that's the reality of the program.
Mm-hmm. All right. And our third panelist, he, of course, covers lots of things, whether it be football, basketball, and whatnot for the Sons of UCF. And he's the only one amongst us who can claim that the president of his fan club is primetime Deion Sanders. We welcome Andrew Cherico.
I mean, what's the point of having my thoughts on men's basketball when you just heard everything you needed to from Chris and Christian? But no, appreciate it, Jeff, by the way.
You draw the shortstop going third, that's all.
Yeah, it's just going to happen.
I assure you, you've got more than we do.
No. But to elaborate on what Chris and Christian said, Moneyball is the absolute way that this men's basketball team is going to have to, or the route that they have to go to building these teams. They can't, and on top of that, they can't afford to miss on any of these guys who to us seem like highly paid players, but to other programs are middle of the pack bench players. When UCF dishes out 500,000 or 600,000, those guys are expected to start. And now UCF in this new era of college basketball is going to need those guys worth 500, 600,000, because they'll obviously be leaving at the end of the season to be worth about $1 million or $2 million by the time the season ends to show that they got their worth. Example of that was Keyshawn Hall. I'm sure Keyshawn Hall was not highly paid coming to UCF, but now he just signed huge NIL deal with Auburn, and he's going to be the guy for them next season. But that's kind of the style that Christian was talking about. These building of the teams, UCF is going to have to find these lower level schools that nobody's really looking at, because the height of the pecking order is looking at us for players to pick from us. But if UCF looks lower, hopefully they can find some guys in between that value. Keyshawn Hall definitely overplayed his expectations, I would 100% say, led the Big 12 in scoring, and that's just an example of that. And now with some of these new guys coming to UCF, Jermichael Stillwell, highest 4-star recruit, Riley Kugel also tied for the highest 4-star recruit UCF has brought in, highest transfer recruit UCF has brought in. Those are the kind of lineups that UCF is going to have to build. And a guy like Mustafa Chiam, who back in the day you thought would be a building piece for this team, is no longer going to happen. You're not going to get building corner pieces. Those guys are going to be gone. Those guys are going to use what they can from their freshman year. Mustafa reclassified, and we thought this guy can be the future of the program. He's out in one season.
Well, of course, as I like to say, as the moderator of the show, I get to gravy train off all the great points that you guys make. So it makes my job easy. But yeah, the fact that, we're going through a complete overhaul roster 2 years in a row, and I don't see where that's going to change next year either. The sad reality is that, one and done has totally changed from, from what it used to be. Now it's one and done with your entire roster versus, a superstar player. And Johnny does not get enough credit for the talent he's been able to bring in and keep things afloat. And it's really basically he's got one hand behind his back in trying to navigate this landscape as it is currently. Of course, obviously today, the news about Mustafa Sham has really dominated the headlines because, he definitely was a tremendous bright spot in his freshman season at UCF. And of course, he is hitting the transfer portal. Lots of buzz about where he's going, how he got there, and whatnot. So if one thing is for sure, as much as I hate the portal, it certainly does give us something to talk about, doesn't it, guys?
Big time.
All the time. I wanted to make one quick comparison, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
These are reported figures. I mean, I've always kind of taken the reported NIL figures with a grain of salt because we have no, factual evidence. We have no viewing of the contracts, which I think at some point is going to have to change. AJ DeBonsa, the number one recruit in the country going to BYU, Forbes reported his NIL base is $5 million. JT Toppin at Texas Tech has reported at figures around $4 million. For reference, $4 million in next year is roughly the 18th pick of the NBA draft, according to Spot Track. So you're making a huge amount of money. There are programs that are investing huge amounts, professional level amounts of money into these into some of these players, and it's money that is right now being front loaded until the House settlement passes, and it has to go before the cap. So you're getting a lot of these players that are into the portal right now, especially because they know this might be their one and maybe only chance at a major payday. So I think that's a lot to do with it too. And Andrew kind of alluded to this too. I think the state of college basketball and maybe college athletics as a whole is a food chain, and I think you're going to see, especially when rev share kicks in, I think programs that are not devoting the resources to football, like the Big East especially, are going to have a power shift when it comes to basketball.
Christian, Andrew, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just the two players you mentioned, those are also two schools that UCF has to play every year.
Yeah,
and
sure is.
That's part of what makes it so frustrating is it's not like when UCF is the AAC and you hear about crazy things that are happening, but they're happening in another sphere. UCF is living in this ecosystem and having to directly compete against the teams that are shelling out.
You look at the backing though of those two institutions, right? I mean, you've got the energy backing in Texas Tech, and you've got the the Latter-day Saints, and the presence of the church and the community in BYU is so unified across the country. So it's different. Yeah,
but UCF is Space U. So
and we also can't. You mentioned a picture about Pooh earlier. You can't forget about UCF icon Elijah Hulsey, I believe is his name. Hulsey, excuse me. Can't forget about him. As far as I know, he's still on the roster. So that's two solid pieces right there. But no, I think it speaks to the testament of it's going to be a culture shock for UCF. I know, especially last season, Darius Johnson with Jalen Sellers being injured. He was the only real returner, played solid minutes. A lot of these Big 12 schools have already felt that impact. Now it's just UCF's time for it.
Yeah. Chris, I have to ask you. So if somebody would have told you a few years ago that a majority of your time be spent on this guy's coming, this guy's going, this guy's coming, it would take up hours of your day, would you have believed them?
I want you to know this is just an inside baseball story that when both the Mustafa Cham and the Dylan Risk portal news happened, I was taking my son to karate class. So I'm going to have to start taking my computer to the dojo. I'm not really thrilled about that.
That's the quote of the episode right there. I'm going to have to start taking my computer to the dojo.
All right. First one on the board there. All right. So we talked about UCF getting to the college basketball crown. So they made the postseason, and brand new first year tournament put on by Fox. It got to play for scratch. So that also tells me, okay, if we're motivated by money, and we know this won't happen, why wouldn't UCF invest more money in basketball if they'll play for this kind of dough? Let's get your thoughts on what you think about the performance in the tournament? And do you think this tournament has a future? Christian, you're first this time.
This is me learning that they were playing for money. The announcers did not mention that every 30 seconds during the games. I had absolutely no idea. That's shocking information to learn.
Gus, $300,000.
Just everything. They're literally just bringing the ball up court. It's like $100,000 on the line. We love Gus Johnson. I'm going to be honest. I'm a Crown convert. I had a lovely time watching The Crown. I thought it was a lot of fun. No, I don't know if I'd watch it for 1 second if UCF wasn't in it, but that's the nature of these things. Is at the end of the day, it's like there were a lot of jokes about it. There always are when there's a new basketball tournament or new any kind of thing like this that pops up. But there's a couple things here. The first is that the NIT has always not been, some super prestigious event, at least not for many decades at this point. But it's felt like, and I don't totally know why, it's felt like even just in the last 5-10 years, that event has fallen off even more so than it already was. Like I remember even when UCF made their run in it, their semifinal run in 2017, I believe that was. It was still like, oh, it's the NIT. Like, there's some big programs in it. And then you started seeing over the last few years, some of the larger programs declining NIT bids when their team did not make the NCAA tournament. You saw the NIT messing with its bids to try to start keeping some majors out and things like that. That tournament's just fallen off. And you saw this year, I believe they only had, it was 2 or 3 Power 4 teams that went to the NIT at all this year. And the Crown is just, it's just fun. I treat it like the Gasparilla Bowl or something. It's just fun, free basketball at the end of the season. It doesn't have to mean something. I don't think that it's some super prestigious thing where, man, I go to sleep at night dreaming of the day UCF hangs a Crown banner, but it was just getting a bunch of fan bases together that are generally pretty good sized fan bases who have some track record of caring about basketball or having a solid basketball program and just getting them together for a fun tournament. I thought when they aired the games made a lot of sense. I thought sort of having them as appetizers for the big March Madness games was good. And listen, these are, the contracts Fox has, it's the Big 12, it's the Big East, it's the Big 10. It's going to be worth it probably from a TV rating perspective because there's always going to be years where an Ohio State doesn't make the tournament or a Nebraska this year who actually somehow got fans out to Vegas for a weeknight game. So I have no issues with the Crown going forward. I think it's a way more entertaining landing spot for UCF in most years, which is probably going to be what's going forward than the NIT was. And also from your UCF's perspective, it doesn't hurt to not be on no notice told you now have to host some random Wednesday night game against a mid-major team at home that's going to cost you a bunch of money. It's easier to just send everybody to Vegas, have some fun.
Yeah, and from a money perspective, the expenses were picked up for them to go out there too. So it's also a big plus there. Andrew, your thoughts?
I would say the Crown is a good. I don't want to make it sound like this, but consolation prize. It's not anything that you should be too happy about. Personally, as somebody watching UCF, I'd much rather see them get knocked out of the first round of March Madness and then win the Crown. Maybe the players prefer the money side of it, so that's up to them. But I mean, when you look at the talent of the teams in the Crown, there's arguments to be made that the Crown was the second best tournament this year over the NIT. And a lot of these Crown teams' rosters were depleted, including UCF. UCF only had Darius Johnson and Mustafa Chiam as the starters from the season. Jordan Ivy Kerr was coming off of the bench. So this didn't mean too much. And that would have initially confused me about the timing of the Crown starting, or if the transfer portal should be after the Crown starts or after the NCAA tournament happens, because you still want to see high competition basketball. And it was just a little bit, while it was great opportunity for Nils and Tyler to raise their stock and be able to transfer out, you still want to see competitive basketball in the Crown. So hopefully that doesn't become a watered down tournament in the future.
Chris?
So a couple things. I do think the Crown has some ability of staying power just because of the TV backing and because of the fact that you're going to have major conferences involved on a year in, year out basis. And there's, it offers something uniquely different. It reminds me of that. I forget the tournament it was, but where they offered like $1 million. It was like almost like a pickup tournament of some kind. It was really popular for a while. I just can't think of the name off the top of my head. Where you had like semi-pro or pro teams that would assemble and all go play. TBT. Thank you, Adam, behind the scenes. The shame in it is that it means nothing. It really doesn't mean anything in the long term. You used to have the NIT. If you were a team that would make the NIT, you could look at it and say, look, this is what we got coming back next year. You can kind of carry over some of that momentum into the next season. Nobody's going to be on any of these teams next year. Let's be honest. If they are, it's one or two guys. And, it's kind of a celebration of the season. I guess at the end of the day, it's a nice experience. It's money in the guys' pockets. It's national television broadcasting, but in the grand scheme of things, it does not mean anything to UCF basketball going forward, as sad as that is to say. And we'll see. I mean, I think on the whole, I think the tournament does have a chance to maybe usurp or at least maybe run, some sort of concurrent to the NIT. The NIT this year, you notice that the field was substantially mid-major heavy, and I wonder whether mid-majors take a look at that as an opportunity. Some of the good mid-majors that would be top seeds in those tournaments and say, hey, we want into this thing. We want to try to come get some of this money. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Yeah.
Boise State made a good run at it. That's one example.
Yeah, no doubt. So interesting aspect when you talk about the NIT, this is what I could see happening, because I think whether we like it or not, the NCAA tournament's going to expand. It's going to have more power conference teams in the tournament. The NIT might become a de facto mid-major championship, if you will. I can kind of see that happening. What I loved about the Crown was the timing was brilliant. That window, between the regionals and the Final Four, they fed product to college basketball junkies, which is great. And and there were some entertaining games in there, if you were able to watch some of those. So I guess my next question would be, should we hang the banner for the Crown?
Runner up?
Yeah.
If you're runner up, I think you can entertain the thought, but I think champion certainly holds a lot more weight. And Andrew, and something Andrew said, and I meant to make this clear. Can we please move the tournament? And I don't know if it's going to matter as much for the Crown, but can we please move the transfer portal to the end of the NCAA tournament for the love of God? To have to worry about guys leaving in the middle of the tournament or start having their heads turned while they're trying to win the national championship. That's ridiculous.
It is. I would say
I don't think it would have done anything for the Crown. I still think the guys are going to protect themselves as opposed to going to play for what amounts to $10,000 each. But
yeah, no, absolutely. Honestly, I'm team hang the banner. I know it's a joke, but if you think about it, the longevity of the Crown really depends on how it looks in the future. To say that UCF is the runner-up of the first college basketball Crown in 10 years, if it still exists, pretty good feature, especially if it becomes more competitive or it becomes established over the years. Now, if the Crown evaporates in the next 5 years, people are going to look up and be like, what the hell is the college basketball Crown?
You only get one shot at hanging that banner, though. Like, you can't wait to see if the Crown is good, and then in 5 years,
exactly. So I think you just have to go with it now.
Throw it up. Get it up there. I'm pro all banners. I don't even care. If they'd lost the first game, I would have wanted a banner that said we made the Crown.
I think we lost all shame when we hung up second round on IT. That's just my personal opinion.
This is a program that has a national champions banner for a year where they finished 6th in the AP poll. That you can hang a Crown banner. Like, it's okay. It's fine.
Precedent has been set.
That's teetering on a heel turn there from Christian.
Oh, yeah. There we go. So our first wrestling reference in there, Sid.
Hey, WrestleMania is this weekend. Get ready, boys and girls.
There we go. All right. So time for our mid-show segment that we call Rank 'em. And I'm going to do a little inside baseball here for our audience as well, because the idea for this segment, which we did not do in the first show, was actually born from a pre-show conversation before that first show. Christian and Chris were involved with that as we were talking about the best bread dining option. And of course, we know what Christian feels about OG. But without further ado, we are going to do Rank 'em on best dining bread options. And I threw these out there: Olive Garden breadsticks, Red Lobster cheddar bay biscuits, Outback honey wheat bread. You can almost say this is kind of just a throw in just to have a fourth option. I'm kind of throwing a little curveball out there, or at least looping out what I'm thinking at this point. And then Texas Roadhouse rolls. So we're going to break that down. And if you would give your list from 4 down to 1, so we get that drum roll for the top one. Andrew. Take it
I
away.
feel like this is the main event of the evening, guys. This is what all the basketball talk, all the football. It's like, nah. This is what it really comes down to.
The
And
main
I've
event is
created a
literally
game
about
plan for this.
appetizers. Incredible.
This is what it's all about right here, ladies and gentlemen. I've come down to a list. I actually looked at the list 10 minutes before the show, so didn't really have time to plan this out. Tomorrow off of the gut
Deep
feeling.
research there, Andrew. Good job.
Yep, absolutely. I'm talking about Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits, number 1. And I don't know. Christian, you're wrong. It's okay to have your opinion, but you're wrong. They're very versatile. I mean, all right, if you look at all 4 of these, which one do you see commonly being bought the most out of retail stores? That's first one. Second one, you get unlimited amount of these for free from last knowledge that I have. When I've been to Red Lobster. Third, they're great. They're when they come out hot and ready. They're fantastic. Second, I'm going with the Texas Roadhouse rolls. Why are you in shock, Christian?
I have many. Go ahead.
All right. He's just an.
There's a reason Christian's going last in this segment, by the way.
Texas Roadhouse rolls are fantastic. If you've ever had them, the cinnamon butter is amazing. I love every part about it. It's a great way to get ready for a rack of ribs, I should say. Third is the OG breadsticks from Olive Garden. They're solid. I wouldn't give them the highest rating. I'll dip them in the soup sometimes when I have them or with the salad. So they're okay. You know what I mean? They're like, all right. And then fourth is the Outback or wheat bread. Honestly, I need to put like a ton of butter in it to make it enjoyable.
All right, Chris Boyle.
And I'll follow the instructions of going 4-1 here and to build the drama.
4-1. No. I'm 1-4. I did.
Yeah,
I know. It's supposed to go 4-1.
Okay, I didn't want to confuse the audience. All right.
It's all right. It's all good.
No, I first let me preface this by saying I actually enjoy all 4 of these breads. So this is like 1A, B, C, D to some degree. Okay. There's a little bit of separation between a couple of them, but on the whole, I'd say these are all pretty solid choices while you're waiting for your entree. I would go with the Outback honey wheat bread number 4. I do like the whipped butter that's offered with it as well. Number 3 for me would be the breadsticks at Olive Garden, which I know is going to be a shot to the heart. Christian is absolutely devastated, but Andrew's absolutely correct, ranking it 3rd. Number 2 would be the rolls from Texas Roadhouse. I think that's right. And look, the Cheddar Bay biscuit is the superior choice. Like let's not beat around the bush. And we have boxes of the Cheddar Bay biscuit mix at home. My wife makes them in our oven. There is no way on planet Earth I'm choosing anything other than those. Those are a regular thing at whether I go to Red Lobster or whether I'm at home on a Thursday night. That's something that is made in this household. It is absolutely sitting number 1. And I'm still bitter, by the way, about tacos having been slandered on this program the last time. I will not let that die anytime soon.
Take it into the grave.
Can I add that Chris is a man of culture for choosing the exact same order that I did?
I'm holding on to that for a long, long time. My opinion of certain people changed over the course of this program.
All right.
Actually, I have to add one more thing.
Yeah.
We're the people's choice. And the reason why I say that is whenever you go out to a restaurant, what number out of these 4 options, when you say the restaurant, what is the first thing you think of? When you say the Outback, you don't think about the wheat bread. Olive Garden, arguably the breadsticks. They said it's unlimited. So
for
the pasta. When you go to Texas Roadhouse, you look forward to the cinnamon rolls. When you go to Red Lobster, give me all of those biscuits is what I'm talking about. That's the number 1 thing that comes to my mind personally. Screw that.
It helps you rationalize how expensive some of the seafood is and that those are free.
Absolutely.
All right. So I'm actually going to go out of turn and go next because I want Christian to be the last
really
one.
Really building attention here, Jeff. Excellent work as a moderator.
Doing my best. All right. So I will also go Outback honey wheat bread at number 4.
Good choice.
Number 3 is the Olive Garden breadsticks. So that's 3 threes. And you can just see the daggers coming out of Christian's eyes as I say this. Number 2, I'm going to go with the Cheddar Bay biscuits, and I'm going to go Texas Roadhouse rolls as number 1. And they're so good you can eat them without the cinnamon butter. Exactly. And I could actually just eat those as a meal. It's a good way to cut the cost on the check. So I go Texas Roadhouse.
Have any of you guys ever watched Scott Pilgrim versus the World by chance?
Not many
Anytime.
years.
The first, like when I saw this as a topic, the first thing that came to mind is the quote that it gets up: "Bread makes you fat." Bread makes you fat.
I think
you could literally pop some of these and just eat them as a meal. Some of them are really addictive.
Yes, absolutely. All right, and without further ado, Christian,
the floor is yours.
Yeah, really quickly, just before since I'm going last, I feel like I almost have the role of Jeff here, so I just want to give a quick programming note to the audience. You've heard some really terrible things here, and I apologize to you, the listener, that you've had to go through this, that you've had to hear these things. I understand now. I've listened to podcasts. I understand how frustrating it can be when a host says something truly radical and truly insane, and to hear it 3 different ways. I understand. Stay with us. I will fix this up. Stay with me, and we will fix this. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. 4th, I left blank. We need this Outback BS on my list anywhere. Not even remotely in the category of this other 3. In fact, I think I might go Longhorn bread before Outback bread. No one would go to Outback and care for that bread to be there. They sell the Cheesecake Factory bread in stores even. That bread doesn't belong there. Number 3 would be the Texas Roadhouse rolls. I can see why people like them if you have the palate of a 9-year-old and think dessert comes before your meal.
I do.
But, so from that perspective, I understand it. They are very tasty. They are simply at the wrong point in the meal. I don't believe that sweet and cinnamon deliciousness is what you eat before you have steak. Number 2 on the list would be the Cheddar Bay biscuits, which Andrew and Chris have both pointed out are so great that they are easily replicable at home. They're that level of cheap that you just pick them up at the store. It's the same product. Not a selling point for me typically to go to a restaurant and say, this is so attainable, I can just make it at home. But instead, I'm going to spend $45 on a subpar lobster to have it here in a restaurant. And number 1 would be one of the finest food items to come out of American restaurant chain culture, and that would be the Olive Garden breadstick. It is beautiful. Andrew, you talked about the Cheddar Bay biscuits being versatile. You are wrong. They are not. People just eat them. The Olive Garden breadstick, however, is incredibly versatile, and you even gave us an example. It can be used in your soup. It can be used with one of 3 different dipping sauce options offered by the restaurant. It can be used with your pasta. If you're feeling adventurous, you can even break it open and make a little breadstick sandwich. In fact, they used to sell breadstick sandwiches on their lunch menu, and they were delicious. There is no bread option more versatile, more beautiful, and more impactful to American culture than the Olive Garden breadstick.
I have to jump in real quick because I've been served enough of the Olive Garden breadsticks to know if they're even marginally not fresh out of the oven, they're worthless.
I find that untrue.
I've never been served a Cheddar Bay biscuit that hasn't been basically right out of the oven. That is essentially like eating a savory, cheesy sponge in my entire life. There's no comparison. This is obscene. This is absolutely obscene that you'd pick anything other than this.
I have an important question I'd like the entire floor to answer, and you can just go one by one. When is the last time you ate inside a Red Lobster?
Inside of one.
Probably around a month ago.
A little bit longer for me. Probably within 6 months.
Would be the same for me as well because the one near me closed.
True.
But
not a great endorsement for Red Lobster. But.
No, but if it was still open, I would probably say I would have, have been once or twice since then for sure.
I just need to add these Olive Garden breadsticks just aren't that tasty.
All right, that's all, folks. That's all for our show tonight.
You mentioned the versatility of them. I feel like they almost
one episode that finishes with less than 4 guests.
They need to be eaten with a sauce, with a soup. They can't just be devoured by itself like a Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuit can.
So you're saying it's a complimentary product and not a main star. Oh gosh! If we didn't have 2 more segments, this would be a great walk-off. But we've got to get to
this is halftime, and we have more important things to do.
yes, we have to get back to the madness. So let's talk a little bit more basketball one more time. With Houston's run to the NCAA championship, how does the Big 12 rate versus the other conferences, power conferences, if you will, in the pecking order from this past season. And Chris, take it away.
Shout out to me. First off, I had Houston and Florida as my bracket finalists. I think it's the first time I've ever in my life that I've gotten that right. I think, was it on this show that we talked about like the SEC having such a great year and kind of the pecking order of if they've usurped everybody in basketball? I said from the get-go, I said the Big 12 maybe didn't have as good a year from 1 to 16, but the very top of the league, I still thought it could go toe-to-toe with anyone, and we saw that. Houston and Texas Tech and BYU, those teams all made really good runs in this tournament, and it says a lot about the state of the conference and where things can be, that Kansas was, quite frankly, by their standards, terrible this year, and yet they made the tournament and they really didn't affect the standing of the conference whatsoever. It wasn't viewed as inferior because Kansas was down. Houston, the top 5 or 6 teams in this league were still top 25 teams virtually from day one to the end of the season. And I didn't even mention Arizona, another team that went to the Sweet 16. So on the whole, year in and year out, I think the Big 12 is still going to be a top 3 league. The Big East, like I mentioned, I think the money part of it is going to be really fascinating to see the programs like St. John's and Villanova and Providence and so on and so forth, Xavier and all these Marquettes. All these programs are going to divert all of their financial resources to basketball, and how that's going to change the dynamic once we do have some sort of cap across college athletics. But the SEC obviously has just sheer volume and some top-end brands. The ACC has eventually got to get better, but they were way, way down this year. And the Big Ten, I still think, is a little bit top-heavy. I still think it's very dependent on Michigan State and a couple other teams. But I'd say in most years, I'd say the Big 12 at no worse is going to be the second or third best basketball conference in America.
Christian?
I think I love this conversation because what it reminds me of so much, and it's why it's so relaxing to me, is for so much of my life, whether UCF was in Conference USA, whether they were in the AAC, it felt like moments like Houston in that championship game, for example. If that was when you're in the AAC, it's like life or death moments to prove the rep of your conference. And particularly in the AAC era, for UCF, for Cincinnati, for Houston, there was such a fight to claw your way to some level of respect and try to convince casual fans that your league could be one of the big boys. And it just was stressful to have to deal with that. And I like that now they're in a conference where it just doesn't really matter. It's to Chris's point. It's year to year, they ebb and flow, but no one watched Florida win the championship this year and go, oh yeah, the Big 12 sucks now. We shouldn't think of them as a power league in basketball. It's a very deep, very tough league. And yeah, the SEC had a fantastic year. 14 of 16 teams made the tournament. Obviously, just by math at that point, they were going to have a good shot at getting some teams to go far. And I think so much, regardless of the full tournament, so much of the narrative for these things is set by what happens at the end. And I do think Florida winning it, Houston blowing it because they probably should have won that one, was unfortunate because it really sort of was the cherry on top of allowing the narrative to blossom of, yes, the SEC has dominated football for years and now they're here for basketball. But
don't forget Texas Tech should have put them away 2 rounds earlier.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Florida just basically annihilated the 2 different Big 12 programs out of nowhere when they should have won the games. But yeah, the Big 12 is still an excellent basketball conference. I think UCF might prefer if it was a little weaker than it is. But the other thing to keep in mind is, as we talked about, for better or worse, the March Madness tournament is about to expand again, which will mean even more Big 12 teams in it. And I mean, honestly, we're at the point, a quarter of the league's teams have made a championship game at some point in the last 5 years. It's been Baylor, Texas Tech, Kansas, now Houston. It's a deep league with a lot of programs who really, really care so much that they're going to spend $1 gazillion on their teams, as we talked about earlier. So it's in good standing. And I like that. I one of my favorite things the Big 12 era is just not having to have the worry of, man, we got to prove it this year, or they're not going to take our league seriously.
Andrew.
So I agree with both of what they said. Obviously, these guys have far superior ball knowledge. No, but in talking about more of a conference perspective, if you look at UCF season this year, there were so many games, especially against championship runner-up Houston, where they lost in the final seconds. Losing in the final seconds to obviously not as strong as a Kansas team, but reaching that far, I think that goes to the power discrepancy of the Big 12. I feel like the conference is so deep in the sense that the top 5-6 teams who make it to the conference tournament, to the national tournament, those teams are really competitive and they're ready to go. I feel like you look in other conferences, when you get closer to the 5, 6, 7, 8, those teams, you see a significant level drop off. But I feel like in the Big 12, those top 5 teams can compete with any other team in the country. I agree with Chris where he says no worse than 3 every season. There should be no reason why the Big 12 isn't at least 2 or 3 in the terms of having Houston, having powerhouses like Kansas. Iowa State has really stepped it up in basketball. So just that combination, I definitely see UCF still, not UCF, sorry, Big 12 still being a very strong basketball conference, and I can see national championship winners soon.
Kelvin Sampson said it best to me in the group of reporters when they were here in town. It's going to be determined by winning games on the road. Houston's success was that they could win anywhere, anytime, any place. They were 19-1 in the league. They went through and beat everybody in Kansas City. They beat Purdue in Indianapolis in the regional in the Sweet 16. They went on the road and beat won games in San Antonio. UCF looked like they were going to been kind of in that mix, right? They won 2 of their first 3 road games in Big 12 play. They went on the road and beat Texas Tech. They beat Arizona State. They lost their last 7 road games, and I think that's going to be something going forward where if they want to be a team that pushes for the tournament, that's going to be a focus, proving that they can win anywhere in this league and in some of the very difficult environments of this league.
And I think we need to go back to see how close UCF was to making this tournament. Just a 7-game losing streak in February helped absolutely nobody out. If you even lose only 4, maybe take away 3 of those, UCF, maybe with the win to Kansas, a win against Houston, UCF is arguably in the tournament run and have a chance to make a deep run.
Yeah, and it is very interesting to look back at the tournament. The SEC. They get the roses this year. They did have a strong conference. I still don't agree with the 14 getting in. I would have rather have seen some mid majors that were more deserving than the bottom portion of the SEC. But they're the top half of their league. They had legitimate title contenders.
You mean you didn't want to see Texas lose in Dayton and fire its coach 2 days later?
Yeah, how interesting would that have been, right? And then of course the SEC was also, they were always touting, hey, we've gotten the most teams in the Sweet 16 and the most in the Final Four. Yeah, you had more bullets than everybody else to fire. So of course you were able to work with that stacked deck. But again, I think the fact that Houston went to the title game and was such a great representative of the Big 12. And, I just feel so bad for them that they couldn't bring it home. Kelvin Sampson has done an amazing job with that program. He made them a power before getting into the Big 12. And he's certainly validated a Hall of Fame career, in my opinion, as far as that goes. And it did not surprise me when they came back and beat Duke. They pulled that miraculous win in Kansas back in the early part of the season as well. So, Big 12 is certainly going to be 2 or 3, if not the top conference, because I want to see if this great run by the SEC has staying power. That still has to be proven as far as that is concerned. All right, let's talk some football, because it's never too early to talk football. And of course, spring camp has been underway, and the burning question is, have we or will we learn anything about UCF football from spring camp? Christian.
Yeah, we learned Dylan Risk isn't going to be here this fall, so that was a big one. Spring's always interesting, even when you don't have a brand new coaching staff, because you do learn things. I mean, you learn some basic things about the team, but I think that especially for this season when Frost is back in and they brought in, God, how many new players are they bringing in? Like 30 plus players that are new to the roster right now. It's just, they're learning as much as we are, it's all pretty new. And I think we've learned some stuff about some guys who are going to be where. We've seen some ideas of what the offensive line might look like. We've heard some names at wide receiver who have had standout performances in the open practices and just stuff we've heard behind the scenes and all that. I think one of the bigger things that we've sort of learned a little bit about is just kind of like the Frost culture overhaul that's coming in. And I thought a good example of that was just this past weekend when Sean Clark, the offensive line coach, spoke, and several different O-linemen spoke to the team, spoke to the media. And all of the O-linemen who spoke had slightly different versions of saying the same stuff that I'm not going to call it shade at the old era with Malzahn, but it was interesting when they were asked about what they like about this new staff. Keegan Smith was asked about Frost and the staff. He talked about how there's really no eggshells. It's not like you're walking on eggshells when you're around him, how they're comfortable, how under Malzahn staff, it kind of felt like they had their guys and everyone has an opportunity. Cam Kinney along those lines talks about how Frost is a player's coach, how there's more of a conversation or dialogue between the coaches and the players. Jabari Brooks talked about how they try to lift your spirit. It's not some huge deal if you make a mistake. It just felt like a lot of subtle ways to say, hey, it was not fun anymore with the last staff. And I don't think that's a surprise when they had just gone 4-8 in a year where people thought they might be a Big 12 dark horse and things kind of went off the rails. But Frost's big mission when he came in 2016, the first time around, was to reset the culture. And it's kind of funny that you fast forward 7 or 8 years, and obviously it's not like UCF's coming off of 0-12, but the culture is kind of in the same place again. It's even more challenging this time because you have 30-plus new guys who are in there too. And we know that that's where Frost thrives. That might be his biggest strength, is his ability to build a culture. So already starting to see that take hold and being at the open practices and seeing the players are having fun. It's fun again. And that's the first step. And now we'll see what they actually have. And maybe if they can pick a quarterback from a group of guys where no one's necessarily pulling away with ease right now. But yeah, we've just learned about the sort of culture reset underway and how it seems to be, from that perspective, going well so far.
All right. Great points there from you. And Andrew, you're next.
I mean, I'll take this question pretty literally. I mean, you do learn stuff about UCF football in spring, especially you learn a lot about the players. You learn players' backgrounds, why they chose UCF. You learn from new players on the team like Dwayne Thomas and DJ Black. They called Dwayne Thomas Speedy. They said he's very fast. We've had players tell us about who's been standing out in practices. For example, Day Farmer, Coach Beckton spoke really highly on him before the announcement of his own injury. With the Scott Frost culture, to also add to what Christian was saying, every time Frost is brought up in one of those small press and the small media scrums, almost a smile lights up on a player's face. They never have anything bad to say, and it wasn't just like, "Oh, coach is great; he's helping us succeed." No, they get really in depth sometimes, and they talk about their experience with coach and why they decided to come back. For example, the Henderson twins. They weren't coming. I truly believe they weren't coming back if it wasn't for Coach Frost. They said they had connections with Gabe Davis. He spoke to both of them about the impact that he made. And with the Henderson twins, they love the Frost culture, and they just want to be able to experience that. And also, like Christian mentioned, it's a resetting era. We don't know what the quarterback situation is still going to be. While obviously Dylan Risk is gone, we still have 3 quarterbacks in the running. It's, in my opinion, it's looking closer to 2, especially after Cam Fancher has injured his finger. But it's interesting to see where this team is. You learn some more about the playmakers on the roster. Miles Montgomery, it looks like he's taking the running back position. And you learn about the veterans who's been vocal on this team. And you get those little conversations on the side that allow you to get a little bit deeper in touch. Now, you're not going to learn who's the number 1 starter in every position. You're not going to learn what the team is going to do, but you hear from the team.
All right, Chris Boyle.
All right, I'm going to present all of this with a caveat that we have 9 days left until the transfer portal closes again. So anything I say about a player and what kind of role they could have may very well change by the time this video airs. So let's keep it there. I'm not a big believer in culture as a grand scheme thing. I think there's a fresh start, and then there's winning culture and losing culture. If you're winning, everybody feels good. If you're losing, everybody feels bad and everybody's ready to leave, right? We've seen both ends of it. Culture, didn't seem to be a problem after UCF beat Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl, and top 25 classes looked like the norm for recruiting. The culture wasn't bad, but talking to enough players, in front of the camera and away from the camera, it did seem like it had run its course. There was definitely need behind the scenes for some of these players to have somebody new in the room. I can definitely feel comfortable in saying that it was ready for that era to end and a new one to come in. Whether Scott Frost has the success that everybody hopes he has is still to be determined. But if for nothing else, it gets everybody reinvigorated for the season, when last year, the last month covering the team, was about as deflating a football as I can experience being around in my 15 years in the business. I would say that we've learned that UCF needs bodies at wide receiver. I'd say that's a big thing going forward. Day Farmer, as you alluded to, Andrew, likely going to miss the season. At least that's how he said. That's what he said. He was on crutches, had his left leg in a brace. We're not sure exactly the nature of the injury, but it does seem to be of the season-ending variety. Marcus Burke has missed a lot of time this spring. He was expected to potentially start. We've seen a lot of the true freshmen, Waden Charles and Carl Jenkins Jr. in the open portions of practice, which is great that they're able to potentially contribute right away. But they need to have a veteran pass catcher or two added onto this team, I think, just for experience's sake, just to give Taven Jackson, or Jakari Brown, whoever the starter may be, an opportunity to throw to some experienced college receivers. I think that's going to be very important in the coming weeks. And another thing I think you've learned, I think Miles Montgomery, to Andrew's point, I think is going to be a very important figure in this team. He even made mention that he's been a career backup to this point, and he's ready to prove that he can be a starter, can be the guy, and he's run the ball well. He's got breakaway speed. He's got the kind of the body type to withstand a full season. He doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires collegiately. He's only run the ball. I have to look at the exact number here, but he's not carried the ball as much as you think for someone that's been in college football for 4 seasons. So he's got an opportunity now to be the man, with Jaden Nixon as well coming in and spelling him. 131 career carries over 4 seasons. That's what Miles Montgomery's run the ball. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for him to take with and run and potentially be the lead dog in the backfield.
That's what RJ Harvey had in like 3 games.
He's got fresh legs though, so he's got that going. And RJ, before he ascended to the top role, he had limited amounts of experience, mostly due to injury. So maybe Miles can do the 2.0 of that as far as that goes. I wanted to kind of follow up on something Christian said when he was talking about the culture and talking about how everybody there's just a different feeling with the players around Scott Frost. And I think one of the things that probably frustrated the team was Gus Malzahn's stubbornness. And I know head coaches are stubborn by nature, but I think he took it to a whole different level. He just insisted on, chasing the ghost of Cam Newton. He was adamant that, John Rice Plumlee was going to be the guy, when JRP was here. And then all of a sudden, okay, here comes KJ. KJ, oh yeah, he's the most complete guy I've had since Cam Newton. Of course, now Gus at Florida State has now compared Thomas Castellanos, former UCF quarterback, to former Auburn quarterback Nick Marshall. I don't know if that's a good comparison or not, but here's a guy that's just insistent on trying to find a certain piece. I think that had to wear on the team over the course of time. And I kind of feel like, he had his guys. And I feel like with Frost, that does open up the door and kind of rejuvenate the team as far as that goes. And, another several days of camp, and as Chris alluded to, the portal's still open. And but that might be where
Matt Murchell and I joked about this. We talked before I came on air tonight. Him and I and there are probably a few others that are going to go out there basically tomorrow with the roster in hand and take roll like it's the first day of elementary school and see who's actually showed up to practice, because that's where Steven Leonard and I kind of in full credit to Steven for breaking the story yesterday morning had mentioned Walt Claire Flynn wasn't on the field. That was our first indication that something may have transpired, because he was at practice the Friday before that, the open practice. So, that'll be important to see who's going to protect themselves and avoid getting injured for the last 2 practices now that the portal is open. We haven't seen maybe as much immediate movement today as you might expect, but I do think that there will be a few more that trickle out over the course of the next 9 days.
I think it's also helpful to mention that when speaking with coaches, whether a position coach, coordinator, or a head coach, they haven't technically announced anybody starting at a position. That's to simply keep the competition alive. They want it to be known that every position is an open competition. And if you work as hard as you can earn that position, as opposed to a previous coaching staff where it kind of felt like you already know what guys were going to start going into the day one system. Now, it's not nearly, I don't think this team will be as talented as the roster that was on the field last year, but I do think it'll be interesting to see how Frost implements the best guys onto the field, and it's all about protection in the portal.
Christian, anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's weird. I always think it's funny to look back on how teams used to like name starting quarterbacks during spring. Like what a funny concept that is now, because it is true that it's not just you want to keep the competition alive and you want to keep guys engaged, but at the same time, it's like you with the spring portal. I mean, I know that we're likely moving towards one portal window going forward. It sounds like that's the way things are trending, but yeah, you go sit down a player now and say, yeah, I think you're going to be the backup. And he goes, great, I'm leaving. And that's just the reality of things. It's like, I think everyone here is familiar, but if you're in the audience, the model they're talking about is moving almost more towards an NFL model of just ditching spring ball entirely, having some kind of June or July OTA type thing. You just have one portal window and you never actually hold a practice like this until your final roster for the season is put together. That probably makes more sense. Probably the way things are heading, and you have to deal with so much of this stuff.
Yeah, times they haven't changed. That's for sure. All right, it's about time to close off the show, and we do that with a little segment that we like to call Nightcaps as we get ready to pour one. So each of our panelists gets a minute or two to deliver a monologue of the topic of their choosing. And Andrew, you get the honors to go first here.
So I would say, staying on the topic of football, there was one common denominator when speaking to each of the players and their reason to stay. While all the players said, oh yeah, you're in Orlando, it's a great place. Oh, UCF is a great program. It was because of Coach Frost that they came or returned. I think we heard that in almost every, why'd you choose UCF? Why'd you come back? Oh, Coach Frost, have you seen what he did? The impact that he's had on Orlando, the impact that he's had on Central Florida. This team, like we mentioned, I should say, I don't think is nearly as talented as the roster that was placed on the football field last year that completely underperformed with under coaching. And I think that this team is going to be an experiment. I think it'll be fun getting back on the field. And I think the number one thing to look out for is, while yes, everybody wants a winning team, everybody wants to be a championship contender first year out. That's unlikely this season. I think you want to see the steps in the right direction. You want to aim towards a bowl game. You want to see the players not lose. You don't want to see the deflation of the team. You don't want to see the massive losing streaks. You don't want to see players giving up on the field, which I feel like we saw sometimes. We saw some players just out of it on the sideline. We saw players out of it. KJ disappeared for the last 5 games of the season. Nowhere to be found. I don't think that'll be anything close to what we'll see this season.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Chris?
I don't recall a lot of no-win situations that we've seen in recent years, but where a situation where everybody comes out looking worse than when it started. But this situation at Tennessee, I mean, everybody came out looking worse because of it. To those that say Tennessee took a stand and made a decision to part ways with a guy, I get it, right? You also fought for the guy in court to make a huge amount of money to begin with. So you kind of killed a problem that you also started, right? Tennessee no longer has its expected starting quarterback, who is good enough, even though he threw 11 touchdowns against 3 teams, Vanderbilt, Chattanooga, and UTEP. That stat got beat to death as soon as Tennessee started putting this narrative out there to begin with. He was good enough to still get you into the playoff and have you in the top 10 all year, right? For Nico, I mean, the PR hit, not only at the college level, but at the NFL level, this is going to trickle a long way. There's going to be teams higher up that are, in the NFL that are going to see this situation, maybe not red flag it or take a guy off the board. I don't think talent's still going to be, if his talent's still good enough, he'll still get picked, right? But it's going to resonate as the quarterback is kind of that position where naturally you're expected to lead. And to walk away from your team in the middle of spring camp over a reported NIL dispute doesn't resonate well at all. And on the whole, I think the kid ends up taking a lot of the beating for this, when we all probably are smart enough to realize it was more people behind the scenes that provoked this to happen, as opposed to the athlete himself. So it's been a real line in the sand moment. I wondered how that would affect the transfer portal this window, whether it would create a free-for-all once you have sitting starting quarterbacks going into the portal And if he were to go out there and say get paid immediately by another big team, whether you're going to see this chain reaction of guys jumping in, as I kind of mentioned earlier, with the house settlement looming to try to get that immediate payday, or whether Nico was going to become an example and it was going to scare guys off from doing it. And then we'll see how it plays out over the next 10 days. What we've also noticed is that hierarchy where virtually any group of 5 or FCS starter right now is just testing the market to see where they can go. And I don't think that's a good look to go through one window, then to go into another when you think you have your team set or you have your roster set for next year, to have it completely gutted a second time over, I think is just unsustainable for the long-term health of the sport. So yeah, I do hope we see it move towards one off season, one window going forward. But this entire situation has been the front page of college athletics all week, and it unfortunately has been a black eye for a lot of people.
And I guess reportedly Nico is going to UCLA if that report is accurate. So
it's all about the offense they're running, though. That's Colin Cowherd made that very clear. It's all about the offense that UCLA is running.
I'm glad that's been cleared up. All right. And of course, now we'll have to see if we get further reprimanded about Olive Garden breadsticks. Christian, you're next.
I thought about it. I thought about just doing another 2 minutes on the breadsticks, but we will mix it up. Similarly to Chris, I'd like to talk about a cautionary tale with my time, and that is the cautionary tale of UCF baseball I would like to speak on. UCF baseball, you may be familiar with them. They are the baseball team for this university. Rich Wallace is in his second year as UCF baseball's head coach. Last season, 37 wins, surprise tournament team. Everyone was happy. Joe Girardi was a distant memory, as was Greg Lovelady. This year, not so much. 20-16 currently. Wheels fell off very quickly. They had some good wins early, and they've just collapsed. They had a 16 losing streak at one point. It's just been really, really rough, and they can't do much of anything in conference. And I am here to ask you this. What changed? What changed from last season to this season for the UCF baseball team that could lead to them from being the surprise darling team of UCF athletics in the Big 12 era to being this? And I've looked at what changed. I've looked at the differences in last year's team to this year's team, and one thing stands out above all. They added gold jerseys. And I cannot overstate how much their struggles are because they took the shocking step to become the first UCF athletics team of any time, as far as I can tell, since the beginning of the Danny White era to voluntarily add new gold jerseys. You've seen what happens when that happens. I'm looking at you, football team, who has new uniforms on the way. I'm looking at you, basketball team, who's added new jerseys the past couple of years. See what happens when you return gold jerseys to your lineup. And
what did any part of me think this was a real dialogue?
I was so ready for nuanced conversation about the lack of maybe a frontline starting pitching or the bullpen having taken a bit of a dip since March, and here we are talking about gold jerseys.
Those are minor factors I'm not concerned with. They're wearing gold jerseys, Chris. There's a UCF football team our UCF athletics team is wearing gold jerseys, and we saw what happens. I cannot get more nuanced than that.
Although I find it interesting that outside of football, Space U uniforms have kind of been a curse on the other sports, I think.
All that energy is channeled into one game, and that is the space game. So it is what it is. It's a sacrifice they all have to make.
Yeah. All right. Well,
sacrifice I'm willing to have to.
All right. So we'll keep an eye out. And of course, Brian W. Peterson, I'm sure listening in is taking one right to the chest there. So there you go. All right. And my nightcap, I'm going to kind of split it over a couple of things. First of all, and we've kind of exhausted it here, but I'm going to exhaust it a little bit more. The transfer portal. It's, I have grown so weary and so tired of this. And, obviously I will keep up with the news of who's coming and who's going, but it's now I just don't care. It's like, who leaves? Go. If you're coming, okay, welcome. But, tell me if you're still here 6 months from now. That part has become very frustrating. So I want to now just wait until 30 minutes before kickoff of the first game, hand me the roster, and I know who to invest in. That's my first thing. And then kind of a thing from training camp, I think it's, another cautionary tale to put out there. I hope that just because, people are talking about the the culture with Frost and things like that, that does not lead to false expectations for the upcoming season. It's a rebuild. And if anybody thinks otherwise, I'm sorry for you, because it's a full rebuild, and we want to see progress. We want to see what this team brings. We want to see what kind of fight they have. But at the end of the day, camp and culture and all the feel good stuff, we want that. We don't want people, bitching and moaning, being ticked off about all this stuff. But let's not over expectate what might happen come football season. All right, so that's going to wrap up our 5th episode of To Your Point. It's always fun to get all these guys together. For Chris Boyle, Andrew Cherico, and Christian Simmons, I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks for listening.